some of the cheapest foods sitting on UK supermarket shelves right now are secretly some of the healthiest things you can eat. But right next to them are tins that could be quietly wrecking your diet without you even realizing it. It sounds dramatic, but it's true. Because while most people assume fresh is always better, the reality is a lot more surprising. Some canned foods are actually packed at peak ripeness, locking in nutrients that fresh food can lose during transport and storage. In some cases, that humble tin in your cupboard might be doing more for your body than the fresh version in your fridge. But here's where it gets interesting. Not all canned foods are created equal. Some are loaded with hidden sugars, excessive salt, and ingredients you'd never expect, turning what looks like a quick, cheap meal into something your body definitely didn't sign up for. And the worst part? A lot of these are marketed as healthy or convenient, so most people never question them. So in this video, we're breaking down 11 canned foods you should always buy, and 9 you might want to think twice about. Because once you see what's really inside these tins, you won't look at the canned aisle the same way again. Most people walk past the canned food aisle without thinking twice. But that might be one of the biggest mistakes you can make when it comes to nutrition. Because here's the part almost nobody talks about. Canned foods aren't just about convenience. They're often preserved at the exact moment they're perfectly ripe. That means the nutrients are locked in right there and then, instead of slowly degrading during days of transport, storage, and sitting on shelves like fresh produce does. In other words, that fresh tomato you picked up might have lost some of its nutritional value before it even reached your kitchen, while the canned version next to it could actually be more potent. Sounds backwards, right? But it gets even more surprising when you look at specific foods, because some of them don't just match their fresh versions, they outperform them. And one of the biggest examples of this is something you've probably bought dozens of times without realizing how powerful it actually is. Chopped tomatoes might look like one of the most basic, boring things you can throw into your trolley, but they're actually one of the most powerful canned foods you can buy. Here's why. Tomatoes are loaded with something called lycopene, a natural antioxidant linked to heart health and reduced inflammation. But what most people don't realize is that the canning process actually boosts how much of that your body can absorb. So in this rare case, the processed version is doing more for you than the fresh one. And that's just the start. Because once you move further down the shelf, you'll find tins that are basically nutritional cheat codes, packed with healthy fats, protein, and essential vitamins, all for a fraction of the price you'd normally pay. Take sardines, for example. They might not be the most exciting option at first glance, but inside that small tin is a combination of omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin D, and calcium that's hard to beat. And thanks to the softened bones, you're getting a serious calcium boost most people completely overlook. Then there's canned salmon and mackerel. These are often wild-caught, rich in protein, and loaded with the same heart-supporting fats you'd expect from expensive fresh fillets, but at a much lower cost. In some cases, you're getting even more protein per serving than other meat options. And this is where things start to shift. Because while these foods are some of the best choices you can make, not everything in a tin plays by the same rules. And what comes next is where a lot of people get caught out without even knowing it. Not everyone wants to live off fish. And honestly, you don't have to, because some of the most powerful options in the entire canned aisle aren't meat at all. In fact, this is where things get even more interesting. Chickpeas, lentils, kidney beans. They might not look like much, but these tins are basically a cheat code for cheap, clean nutrition. We're talking high protein, loads of fiber, and nutrients your body actually needs to function properly. And unlike a lot of quick meals, these don't send your energy crashing an hour later. Chickpeas, for example, are packed with plant-based protein and slow-digesting carbs that help keep your blood sugar stable. That means you stay fuller for longer, with none of that sluggish, heavy feeling. Lentils take it even further. They're loaded with iron and folate. Two things a lot of people don't get enough of, especially if you're constantly feeling drained or low on energy. And the best part, they're already cooked. No soaking, no waiting. Just open the tin and you're good to go. Then you've got kidney beans and black beans. These are rich in soluble fiber, which supports gut health and helps your body manage cholesterol levels. It's the kind of benefit most people only think they can get from expensive health foods. But it's sitting right there in a can for pennies. Sounds like a no-brainer, right? Well, not quite. Because even with foods like these, there's a catch that most people completely miss. And it can turn a healthy choice into something far less beneficial if you're not paying attention. Take a closer look at the label on some of these tins, and you'll start to see where things can quietly go wrong. Because even foods that seem healthy at first glance can come with hidden extras that completely change the game. Sweet corn is a good example. On its own, it's a solid option, full of fiber and slow-release carbs that give you steady energy. But some tins are packed with added salt or sugar, which most people don't even notice. It's subtle, but over time, it adds up. Then there are butter beans. They're rich in potassium and great for supporting blood pressure. But again, it depends on what they're sitting in. A heavily salted liquid can take something genuinely beneficial and make it far less ideal, especially if you're eating it regularly. And fruit. This is where a lot of people get caught out. You'll see tins of peaches or pineapple and think you're making a smart, healthy choice. And to be fair, if they're stored in natural juice, they can absolutely help you hit your daily fruit intake, especially when fresh options aren't available. But not all tins are the same. Some are swimming in thick syrup, which is basically liquid sugar. At that point, you're not really eating fruit anymore. You're eating something much closer to a dessert. And this is where things start to take a turn. Because once you move into the next category, the difference between a good tin and a bad one becomes impossible to ignore. This is where things go from slightly misleading to seriously deceptive. Because some of the worst offenders in the entire canned aisle don't look unhealthy at all. They're marketed as quick, comforting, everyday meals. But when you actually break them down, the numbers tell a completely different story. Take fruit in heavy syrup. At a glance, it feels like you're making a smart choice. Fruit is fruit, right? But once it's soaked in that thick, sugary liquid, it becomes something else entirely. You're essentially eating a dessert disguised as a healthy option, with sugar levels that can spike your energy fast and crash it just as quickly. And then there's canned pasta. Things like spaghetti hoops or ravioli are often seen as cheap, easy meals, especially for busy days. But most of these are built on refined carbs, with surprisingly high amounts of sugar and salt added in. So instead of fueling your body, they leave you feeling hungry again not long after. But the one that really catches people off guard, tomato soup. It sounds harmless, simple, even healthy. But some popular tins contain shockingly high amounts of sugar, in some cases, pushing close to what you'd find in an energy drink. And most people never even think to check. So what looks like a quick, comforting option can quietly turn into something your body doesn't handle well at all. And just when you think you've seen the worst of it, the next category takes things even further. And this is where things start to get a little uncomfortable. Because some of the most convenient, ready-to-eat tins are also the ones nutritionists warn about the most. We're talking about processed meats, things like canned hot dogs, Vienna sausages, and those all-day breakfast tins might seem like an easy protein fix. But there's a reason they've built such a controversial reputation. These products are often heavily processed, packed with salt, and preserved with additives like nitrates. And over the years, there's been a lot of discussion around how regularly eating these kinds of foods could impact your health long term. And that completely changes how you shop. But before we finish, there's one final thing you need to realize about all of this. If you found this eye-opening, make sure you're subscribed to Britain's Dirty Food Secrets. We break down what's really hiding in everyday UK foods. The stuff supermarkets don't talk about, the labels most people miss. Hit subscribe now and turn on notifications. You won't look at your food the same way again.